Okay, so welcome everybody. Finally to the featured speaker. We're so happy to have Jordana here, but I'm actually going to hand it off to Justin Rhodes of Daggerheart Lab to do the introduction. Take it away, Justin.
Thank you everyone for bearing with us and joining us here at Drupal Camp Asheville 2021. I'm Justin Rhodes with Daggerheart Lab, and I just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder that this evening, if you're in the Asheville area, we will be hosting an in-person after party tonight at 6:30 at Highland Brewing. Daggerheart Lab will cover your first and probably second drink, as long as our bar tab lasts. And there will be indoor and outdoor space to hang out, and there will be 2 food trucks on site. So please join us there if you're in the Asheville area and feel so inclined. Also, if you're not in the Asheville area or not quite ready to see people outside of your home, then there's a virtual after party with information at drupalasheville.com. Now, it's my wonderful pleasure to introduce Jordana as our featured speaker today. Jordana is a longtime Drupal community member, where her participation includes volunteering as a mentor and member of the conflict resolution team within the Drupal community working group. She has a passion for communication, personal development, and community health. She currently works as a technical engagement manager under professional services at Pantheon. And now I'll hand it over to Jordana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. What's that law called when everything goes wrong? So, I'm just gonna jump in because we've already lost a little bit of time. I was gonna start with a little story about, well, let's start off. This session is called How to Win in Arguments. And I was going to start off with a little story about when things go wrong in discussions. But I think we all have a great pool of examples to pick from in our own experiences. So I think instead we'll try to look at when things go right. So first off, we need to know about what we're talking about. So let's start off with some terminology. So what are arguments? So whenever you're explaining why you believe something or why someone else should believe that something, you're giving arguments. And arguments should be built up on reason, and they should make your case. And they make your case in discussions and dialogue. So discussions, debate, or dialogue exist between two interlocutors that give arguments and counter arguments. But what's the purpose of all of this? So in the time of Plato and Socrates, people would philosophize about what is right and what is wrong. And based upon those things, and how to think, how to learn, and based upon that is how the Republic was led, and the laws were influenced and created by that. And in doing so, they used discussions and dialogue to exchange ideas to come to a greater understanding of the truth. So the purpose of discussion is the exchange of ideas to come to a greater understanding of the truth. It's about exploring other points of view so you can make a more informed decisions, and so you are more informed and can make more informed decisions. It also aids in critical thinking. Is what I'm believing correct? Are the facts actually facts? So now we can go about what we know what the purpose of discussion is. Now we can say, okay, what does winning mean? So winning means when the exchange of ideas has actually taken place effectively and the ideas are challenged so that we've gained a better understanding of the truth. So note that this session is not called How to Always Be Right. So let's talk about good arguments versus bad arguments. A good argument should be based on reason, and it should make your case clearly based on a solid foundation of logic. Arguments are made up of premises, which are reasons, right? Pieces of logic. Premise 1 plus premise 2 becomes a conclusion, and that's your belief. So how do you win arguments? Just give them the facts. Thank you for coming to my presentation. I was so happy for you to have me. No, we know that doesn't work. If just giving facts would work, we wouldn't do anything that's bad for us, right? So we know facts don't win arguments. Why? Because we aren't rational beings. Oops, sorry. Yeah, we're not rational beings. We do many irrational things, and that's because our brain does conscious and unconscious processing. So Daniel Kahneman calls this thinking fast and slow. So thinking fast means all of the things that are in our memory, the things that come automatic. So it's almost involuntary. You almost have no control over it. And then that does the most of the mental work. Because think about it, if you had to think about picking up the pencil and actively do it, you'd be exhausted within the first hour of the day. So it helps in cognitive ease. It's more emotional, it's more impulsive, and it's automatic once it almost happens automatic once you've learned that thing. And thinking slow is more thoughtful, it's more deliberate, you have more control over it. It's when you're actively trying to solve problems. So the problem becomes that we tend to think we're thinking slow while actually we're thinking fast. So actually some of that automatic thinking and that automatic processing is kind of hijacking that. So this comes in the form of things like confirmation bias, where we kind of interpret the truths or the facts to conform to fit into our belief system. And we might only read or listen to the things that actually confirm our beliefs. So Daniel Kahneman said, we can be blind to the obvious, and we are also blind to our blindness. So that's awesome. The confidence that individuals have in their beliefs depends mostly on the quality of the story they can tell about what they see, even if they see very little. So in order to get better at discussions and giving arguments, we need to first understand who we are, what we think, and what we want to achieve. So we need to know what our intention or goal is. If you enter with the wrong motive, it might lead to bad actions and decisions. So you need to know yourself. What are my actual motives for going into this discussion, and what are the goals you want to, what do you want to get out of it? And you need to be careful about any sub-motives or judgments lurking in the shadows. So you can say, oh, I want to get into discussion with Brad because, I want to teach him something, and I would love to humiliate him because he's a misogynist. So those are some of the things that might be underlying that you might not actually say to somebody, but that will greatly influence how that conversation is going to go. So is your intention to change someone's mind? If so, how can you change something if you don't understand it? So is it that you want to lecture? You want to give a lecture? You want to tell somebody stuff, or do you want to discuss? Are you open to learning? If we think we already know everything, it's very hard to learn anything new. And if you think you can't be wrong, you think you know everything. So be open to learning and criticism. Mistakes happen. It's a part of learning and growing. So be forgiving to yourself and to others. So we should approach it first in trying to understand. And we do that by listening. But the problem is, most people don't listen to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Dr. Stephen Covey said, and this is a great takeaway, if I were to summarize in one sentence the single most important principle I've learned in the field of interpersonal relations, it would be this: seek first to understand, then be understood. So let's start out with how to start a good discussion. Ideally, we'll set rules. No name calling, no personal attacks. And if you're in a situation like a Drupal camp, you already have a code of conduct, so that would help. But also knowing when to stop and when to know that the discussion is failing. So for that, consider the environment. The environment you're in. Is it loud? Is it angry? Is it stressful? Is there a lot of alcohol? That might not be very conducive to a calm and relaxed discussion. So ideally, you would create an environment where everyone feels safe and feels heard. Also try to prepare yourself. So first off, you need to know your intentions and goals and be clear about it. Be clear about your thoughts, your premises, your reasons. And it helps sometimes if you formulated some of these thoughts out and have some bullet points. And I know generally if you're having discussions in a bar, that might not always be the case, but that's why it's always good to have some of this already processed before you start. And also take charge of your emotions. Are you calm and collected? Because that's the best way to go into discussion. If you're already angry, if you're already heated, you're going to start off on the wrong foot. And know what's working against us. Always keep this in the back of the mind. There are language and cultural barriers. There's sometimes power differentials, like one person's a boss or somebody else has much more to lose in this conversation. Like if you're debating about getting a raise or getting fired. There are different privileges and advantages and positions we have. We have different values and principles. We have different priorities, different goals, different sets of histories and points of view. We are in our own way because we have our own biases, our own judgments, and our own criticisms. So we need to be wary of that. We need to be careful that those things don't leak in. So another thing is that I forgot to add here is don't be dismissive. So always remember that because we have these differences, understand that something small for someone else can be something big for you, right? So always try to know yourself, but also try to have patience and understanding with the other person. And don't assume malice. So, Hanlon's Razor says it a little bit rougher, but it says never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by neglect. So you might be thinking someone's doing something just to bug you, but there might be so much more going on. It's generally misunderstandings because of all of these cultural differences, or it's just that you're coming at it from two very different points of view. So instead of jumping to conclusions that there's malintentions going on, try to take a step back and realize that there's probably a lot more going on than you think. Another thing you should consider is if you should even be having this discussion or not. So is this your fight? Is this worth it? Is this person willing to be open and listen? Are you willing to be open and listen? Do you have the mental capacity to do this? Are you already triggered? Are you too emotional? Are you too passionate? Is this a person you always tend to fight with, where it always tends to escalate? When all of these things are true, or some of these things are true, you might want to rethink about having this discussion or not. Sometimes things are just not important enough. It might not be that big of a deal. So reconsider whether you want to jump into this head first. And if you absolutely must, there are so many resources on having difficult discussions to help yourself be calm and to have a constructive conversation. Things like nonviolent communication. So, how do we have good discussions? Well, to have good discussions, we need to communicate better. We need to communicate with each other. And George Bernard Shaw famously said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion it has taken place. So good communication is that when you're listening, you should be actively listening. So you should be listening to understand, right? Not to reply or to catch somebody, but to understand that other person. So you might be asking questions as well to better understand. Be open. That kind of means being vulnerable, but it is worth it because if you are closed to new ideas, this whole point is moot. And be patient, like we said, non-judgmental, understanding that this is a person that has a whole other life, that has completely different ideas probably, and has different experiences than you have. And when you're speaking, use the think analogy. Is this true? Is it helpful? Is it important or inspiring? Is it necessary, and is it kind? Everything you like, every point you're making, everything you want to say should be part of these, should have these 5 things. And a little caveat about being honest. You can be honest without being mean or abrasive. You can tell the truth with kindness and compassion. People tend to use the word "I was being honest" as a kind of cover for kind of being mean. And then the same things as when you're listening, non-judgmental, being constructive and understanding. And also understand that sometimes you have great intentions, but the impact of your words are completely different. So what is understood does not always mean what you meant. So what the other person's understood of what you said could be something completely different than what your intention was. So even if you have good intentions, the impact of your actions can be the exact opposite. So when we're having discussions, it's important to play fair. So have these rules for yourself and ideally for everyone involved. So the first thing is genuinely try to understand the other person. Don't use logical fallacies to attack or trap people. That's a straw man. There's a link there that goes into depth of a lot of these logical fallacies. Don't take words out of context. Don't be defensive. Try to understand and hear what the other person is saying. If they might be misunderstanding you, but then be calm and gently tell them what's actually happening. Reconsider and challenge your perspective and assumptions. Again, you might come into this thinking you're right, but if you're not open to listen and hear what the other person's saying, you'll never learn. And so play fair, even if the other person is not. Don't get dragged down or escalate the conversation. So sometimes conversations do get heated, and that's the time to de-escalate. And to de-escalate the conversation is, first, you need to start, if you are already heated, you need to calm yourself down as well. But you're also going to try to calm the whole conversation. So make sure you're not attacking or fighting or yelling, because people tend to match the other person's and react to the other person's emotions. Ask questions to understand that person instead of assuming things, assuming intent, or assuming that you understand what they're saying. Validate their feelings. If they're feeling unheard, try to figure out how you can better understand them and what's going wrong. Find points where you agree to create common ground. That might be just a goal or the reason why you're having this discussion. Once you have that common ground and where you can find some things that you agree with, things you can go from there. And sometimes it's a good idea to just explain your good intentions. And this should be genuine though, so you can't pretend you have good intentions when you really don't. So sometimes we get lost in the debate and then we get heated and then we forget why we're having this discussion in the first place. So sometimes it's good to circle back to it for both parties. Also, focus on the issue and not on the person. You're not attacking the person. You are discussing the issues at hand. And it's not about right or wrong, it's about the solutions, about achieving the end goal. So sometimes de-escalation doesn't work. And sometimes you can't calm down. So you need to know when to end the discussion and how to do it. You should always, always have an exit strategy. So always have something prepared for when you want to end the discussion. Something like, I think this is interesting, but right now I'm unable to have this conversation. Maybe we can pick this up later. Another thing the amazing Brene Brown said is this: right now this is not constructive for me. I need to put a pin in it, for example. So having that extra exit strategy already and having it practiced, having it like the more you practice it, the more easy it is for you to grab it. So have that exit strategy planned and right there for you. And sometimes, unfortunately, an exit strategy might be actually walking away or running away. I mean, sometimes we've had to do that where some people will just keep going on, and you'll just have to physically remove yourself from that situation. But before you can activate your exit strategy, you need to know when things are at that level. So you need to know your triggers. You need to look at yourself. Are you breathing hard? Is your heart beating faster? Are you impatient? Are you frowning? Like, know your reactions, right? To figure out when's the time to bail. Sometimes we're so passionate about certain things that we get heated, and that's a time for us either to calm down or to exit the conversation. And prepare to be unprepared. There are going to be times when things happen that you do not expect, which is why practicing your exit strategy in saying these words in an either calm or neutral way is so important. People can take you by surprise. Another thing to do is asking for help. So sometimes you try your best, but there's this discussion that needs to happen, but it just keeps going wrong. That's a great time to ask for help, ask for mediation, ask to have a mediator there, ask for somebody to help guide the conversation and keep it on the right track. Get advice from trusted people. But trusted people mean people that challenge you and let you know when you're wrong, because sometimes those are things that you need to hear. And of course, find resources. There are tons of resources online. And once I've updated my slide, I'll add some of these resources to the end. But there are tons of books and videos. They're about critical thinking and about challenging assumptions. So, too long, didn't read, didn't listen. The goal of arguing is to get it right, not to be right. You're gonna be wrong. You're gonna get it wrong. They will get it wrong. It's gonna happen. It's about learning from others and adjusting your beliefs. And that doesn't make you less. That doesn't mean you lose. It makes you stronger because you're learning. Winning means solving the problem, achieving your goal, and learning. So it's not a competition. It's not about right or wrong. It's about getting a deeper understanding and challenging your beliefs so that you can make better decisions and improve. And like I said, it's about constant practice. So this is something that you can be good at one point in your life, but we tend to fall back on behaviors and habits that we've learned as we grew up. That's why constant practice is so important, that we are mindful and proactive on how we live our lives. Will Durant has this amazing quote. It says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." So let me do a little time check. So we have about 10, 13 minutes for questions and discussions, constructive discussions. I can talk a little bit more as well, but I did want to see if anybody wanted to hop in and ask questions. Feel free to jump on.
Yeah, so I haven't seen any questions pop up yet, but there was the comment about interesting that this was titled How to Win, which implies an adversarial approach from the get-go.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure. So yeah, that might have been a little bit clickbaity, but it is about, yeah, that might have been a little bit clickbaity on my part. So, but it is, I do believe winning is when we all win, when we learn. And that's kind of the whole part of it. It's when we win when we all win. Ah,
Right.
wow.
Do you know if there are any trainings that are available, or what sort of resources have given you the best information on how to be better in arguments?
So it the point of this was also about your intention from the get-go. Being good at arguments is also about trying to understand and trying to challenge your own ideas and beliefs. So, and being forgiving to yourself about that. So things like nonviolent communication, but also things about like introspection and um, being able to let go and separate your ego, yourself, from trying to learn and be better, and from that argument and discussion are super helpful.
Okay, so we do have a question here. Do you see it? If you find
Yeah.
yourself in a conversation that has turned adversarial, do you have tactics for breaking the mood and getting it back to a constructive discussion?
So it's going to start with you. If it has become adversarial, everybody's still calm, but it is adversarial and it's kind of gotten off track. You could very bluntly just jump in and be like, "Hey, I think we've gotten off track. Let's get back to blah blah blah." And if you feel like it's going down a path, especially when you feel like it's going down a path that you think is probably going to be unhelpful or unconstructive, um, making a joke can also help ease some tensions. But that needs to be depending. It takes some practice to learn when to do that and when not to do that. But then the active listening and the asking questions to better understand part does come in there, where once you realize it's becoming adversarial, you might start asking questions to better understand what they're saying, because generally when something becomes adversarial, it's probably because they don't feel like they're being heard or understood, is often the case. Does that make sense, Jonathan?
I'm gonna take that as a yes. Yep. Okay. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just did shared a note just on the note of don't assume malice. It sounded very
Mm-hmm.
much like I'm okay, you are okay communication strategy.
So I'm not sure what that means. I was going to ask it a little bit to if somebody can elaborate on it, but the kind of the don't assume malice. I don't like to say assume good intent, because that can go bad pretty quickly. That can bite you in the behind. Um, what I mean with don't assume malice is just because something is becoming adversarial. Yes, don't assume the worst in people. But and just because something has become adversarial, it's not that that person's angry at you or hates you or is trying to get you to anger you. It might just be because they're feeling frustrated. They're very passionate about what's happening. They're hurt. There can be so much other things going on than your first instinct that's this person just being, was going to say a bad word. This person is just being very, I'm struggling with a word.
Blanks. Yeah, that sounds right. So just a question here, like, okay, somebody says, take the personality out of the picture, focus on the facts. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for you personally, is this something that you've had an easy, have you been able to do it more innately, or is it something that you really have practiced on, and what kinds of things have worked for you personally?
So this is the whole thing about where I say practice is so important, because some of this does come naturally to me, but I've also questioned a lot of it. So I've read a lot about it, and I've been trying to practice it. But like I said, sometimes, for example, when we're burned out or stressed, we might fall back on bad behaviors or habits instead of the things we've learned. So when I'm already stressed and angry, and I might be impatient, I won't have that calm demeanor maybe going into the discussion. I won't be listening to understand. I'll be just angrily listening and waiting for my turn to speak, for example. And that's the part where you should catch yourself. And that's where the where the constant practice and being mindful of what's going on and about yourself, mindful of yourself, sorry, knowing yourself and being critical, practicing critical thinking and challenging your own beliefs and ideas comes into play.
Right.
So, and I think the whole part about having empathy and compassion, compassion is a skill, right? Um, it can be learned and taught. So there's things, I think it's called compassion mindset, where you can learn there, where you can learn this. So it's a skill that can be enhanced. And sometimes, like I said, um, when we're not at our best selves, when we're angry, when we're burnt out, sometimes that compassion slips away from us. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's a skill that can be practiced.
Yeah, sounds a bit like the journey of imperfection. Just
Yes.
checking in with yourself and knowing that sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and you just keep trying to do better. Know better, do better.
Exactly.
Somebody commented, don't focus on being right, focus on finding the truth, which is most of the time in between both viewpoints. We can learn from each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The goal is to find the truth. The goal is to find, sometimes we're scared for our ideas to be challenged, but when they're challenged, we better understand ourselves and our ideas, and we become better and stronger for it. And sometimes those ideas and beliefs will change because of that. Maybe sometimes slowly, maybe sometimes all at once. But I consider it a win when you gain knowledge and you have more than you had before then. Yeah, so I'm going to, it's a placeholder. My bit.ly link is a placeholder slide. I'm going to add all of it this week. Sorry about that, but I wanted to have the link there, so you could easily find it if you're rewatching the video, for example, which is hopefully edited with all of the chaos at the beginning.
Yeah, that's all good. We'll do that. Oh, here we go. So here's a question. In a group discussion, say 5 people, do you have a strategy for getting the floor when 1 or 2 people are dominating?
So this is something that happens a lot, and it's hard to do. There are a lot of techniques in this, and I will try to add some resources to it. It's easy if you already have some of that privilege, but sometimes you will have to. That's why sometimes a mediator is necessary, or somebody that's leading the discussion, that they can interrupt and bring the discussion back on track and hear from other people. And there's a skill to that as well. You need to do that in a calm and nudgingly way, like in a nurturing, in a way that kind of facilitates the conversation. So a 1 or 2 line is not as easy, but it's a gentle way of interrupting that conversation and getting it back on track. But sometimes the interruption has to be a little bit more to the point, a little bit more direct in certain situations when people are dominating.
It seems like a case where like your power dynamics would come into play. So, you know, you're going to cut off a conversation with your bosses. That might be pretty hard to figure out. But yeah, there's all that, you know, overhead.
Exactly. And then that's the hard thing. So it's easier to do when you already have a little bit of privilege in the, or a little bit more power, like you said, in the group. But it is harder to do when the two people that are dominating have the power dynamic. So, like I said, there are strategies for it. I will make a note to link that in my resources.
Sounds good. We have a couple more minutes if there are any more questions. This has been a really great presentation. Thank you, Jordana.
Thank you.
I find this stuff fascinating. So
So do I. So do I. So the whole point of this thing about discussions and arguments, and hence the winning, is about learning through dialogue and exchanging information and ideas instead of passively giving information, passively transferring information, which is a little bit ironic because this is a format where it's less discussion based. But when you're listening to a lecture, is different than when you're actively participating in the discussion. You tend to learn and grab, and it tends to like reach you a little bit easier and better.
all right. All right. So thank you, Jordana. Let's all give Jordana a round of applause. That was a really great talk.